A tense arrest. General Victoria Taylor's heart rate remains steady, despite the harsh grip of Officer Harris twisting her arm behind her back. The cold metal cuffs dig too tightly into her wrists, and she can feel a bead of blood forming at the pressure points. Yet her expression is composed, betraying no emotion. The officer's rough handling only seems to fuel her sense of calm determination. Talking back to an officer? Captain Wilson's voice echoes as he looms over her, looking down with a smug sense of authority. His words drip with disdain. That's how people like you end up with problems. Taylor doesn't flinch. She memorizes his badge number, his name tag, even the small mole above his left eyebrow. It's a quiet, calculated move, her training reminding her that every detail counts. Wilson turns to Harris. Check her for weapons. Without hesitation, Harris digs his hands into Taylor's pockets, rougher than necessary. He jabs his fingers into her ribs as if to show his dominance. All the while, he pulls out her wallet, keys, and phone, tossing them into an evidence bag with an almost mocking disregard. His smirk doesn't escape Taylor's notice. When Harris finishes his search, Wilson raises an eyebrow. Something funny? He demands, noticing Taylor's calm expression. Taylor doesn't respond. Wilson's gaze narrows in suspicion. What's going on in that head of yours? He looks at her like she's some puzzle he can't quite solve. But what Wilson doesn't know is that beneath Taylor's perfectly controlled demeanor, she's tracking every word, every action, every detail of the moment. This is no ordinary arrest, and he has no idea who he's dealing with. Harris seems to sense something unusual about her, but he continues his task, digging through her bag and patting down her clothing. However, he doesn't find what's important. What he doesn't notice is the military-grade communicator sewn into the lining of Taylor's jacket. It's there, hidden from view, transmitting her location and silently marking the moment this encounter becomes something far bigger than a routine police stop. Get her in the car, Wilson orders with finality, his tone laced with authority. A knight in holding should fix that attitude of hers. Taylor is shoved forward, her head forced down as they push her into the back of the cruiser. As the door slams shut, Taylor holds steady. She doesn't flinch. The officers have no idea who they've just arrested, no idea the layers of power and consequence woven into the fabric of her life. As the cruiser pulls away from the checkpoint, fluorescent lights hum overhead, creating a sterile buzz in the otherwise quiet space. The air in the processing room reeks of sweat and cleaning chemicals, an unpleasant mixture that fills Taylor's nostrils as she is led into the small, gray room. Standing perfectly still for her mug shot, Taylor's face remains composed, giving nothing away. The camera clicks. A routine motion, yet the implications of what's happening feel far from ordinary. Name? The booking officer asks, not even bothering to glance up from his computer screen. Victoria Taylor. Address? Maple Avenue. Taylor provides her address without hesitation. She knows this game, knows exactly how it's played. But when the officer pauses, narrowing his eyes at the address, Taylor senses the shift. The officer's tone changes, becoming more guarded. Unwarranted search. The booking officer's eyes narrow even further. Westfield Heights, he repeats under his breath, as if it means something more than a mere address. There's an uncomfortable pause. His voice shifts, a subtle but noticeable change in tone. Taylor can hear the judgment lurking behind the words, as if the address alone has already tainted her. Westfield Heights resident, he mutters, then quickly radios in her details, requesting additional verification. His focus never leaves her address. Taylor's mind sharpens. She's heard it before, how they treat her neighborhood, how they see it as a breeding ground for trouble. It's a quiet prejudice that bubbles beneath the surface, lurking in the system, but it's not something she's going to let slide. She knows the game they're playing, but she doesn't intend to be a pawn. Is there a problem with my identification, officer? She asks, her tone calm, controlled. The officer doesn't respond immediately. He walks back to the cruiser, her driver's license in hand. Taylor watches through her rearview mirror, her attention focused, memorizing every move, every glance. Behind her, she hears laughter, the unmistakable sound of mockery. Harris and another officer share a moment, whispering and chuckling about her. As they converse, she catches a few words, but it's the last one that catches her attention. Special. It's clear they're referring to her. They don't know it, but their arrogance has already begun to work against them. A few moments later, Captain Wilson appears, his presence commanding and heavy. Harris points toward Taylor's car, and Wilson approaches with deliberate slowness, his gait unmistakably authoritative. "Step out of the vehicle, ma'am," he orders, his tone cold and sharp. There's no respect, no hint of politeness. Just a demand. Taylor's eyes flash with a quiet defiance. "May I ask why?" she responds, her voice even but firm. Wilson's gaze hardens. "Step out now." The officer's hand rests lightly on his holster, a not-so-subtle threat. Taylor knows it's a power move. A game of dominance. She assesses the situation, ready to play her part without giving away too much. She knows her rights. Enhanced search requires reasonable suspicion of criminal activity, and there is none. Not in her car, not in her behavior, not in her person. "What's your suspicion, Captain?" she asks calmly, meeting his eyes. She's done this before, navigating the red tape and the games of authority. But she's not about to let them play their game without rules. Wilson's face tightens, his jaw setting in a way that makes it clear this is no longer just about procedure. "Out of the car," he growls. Taylor complies, though her movements remain deliberate, calm. She's not resisting, she's only asserting her rights. "I'd like to note that this appears to be selective enforcement," she states clearly, her voice unwavering. Wilson's eyes narrow. "We decide what's selective," he says, stepping closer, but Taylor stands her ground, unyielding. Her heart doesn't race. It doesn't need to. She's prepared for this, aware of her rights and ready to challenge them. "I decline consent to search my vehicle without probable cause," she says, her words precise and clear. Harris smirks, moving in closer. "Look at the lawyer here," he mocks, clearly aiming to belittle her. "Thinks she knows the law." His words sting with contempt. But Taylor doesn't flinch. "I'm familiar with my Fourth Amendment rights," she responds coolly. As the tension builds, she notices that other drivers are watching the scene unfold. Some pull out their phones, recording the encounter. Wilson, noticing the growing audience, gestures toward another officer, who begins clearing the vehicles, instructing them not to record. Taylor's gaze flickers over the faces of the onlookers, memorizing every detail. The badge numbers, the license plates, the expressions of those watching. She's keeping track, and they have no idea how much they've already revealed. "Last chance," Wilson says again, his voice growing more frustrated. "Consent to search or face obstruction charges." Taylor, calm and collected, responds with a simple but firm, "I respectfully decline and request a supervisor." "I am the supervisor," Wilson retorts, his voice laced with irritation. He gestures to Harris. "Detain her." Harris grabs Taylor's arm, twisting it painfully behind her back. The sharp jolt of pain makes her wince, but she remains steady. The words, "Stop resisting," come from Harris's mouth, but it's clear to everyone that she's not resisting. She's merely following the law. "I'm not resisting," Taylor says, her voice clear and firm, knowing her words are being recorded. "I'm complying under protest." Wilson leans in close, his voice low and menacing. "You don't tell us how to do our jobs." Taylor, with remarkable composure, notices Harris's body camera. The red recording light is blinking off, signaling the camera has stopped recording. "Your body camera appears to be malfunctioning, Officer Harris," she points out, keeping her tone even. Harris's grip tightens in response, but Taylor stands her ground. She's not backing down. Her mind races with possibilities, but her military training keeps her calm. This isn't the time for physical action. She's here for something far bigger. "I'll be filing a formal complaint," Taylor states clearly. Wilson laughs coldly, a harsh, dismissive sound. "Good luck with that. Councilman Bennett personally oversees checkpoint operations. Your complaint goes straight to his trash can." But Taylor is unfazed. She's already several steps ahead, and the game has just begun. The arrest continues. As Taylor is shoved into the back of the cruiser, she feels the cold metal seat against her back and the weight of the handcuffs biting into her wrists. The officers have no idea who they've just detained. The air in the cruiser is stale, filled with the sharp scent of disinfectant and fast food wrappers left by previous passengers. The door slams shut with a force that reverberates through her body, but Taylor remains composed. The fluorescent lights of the processing room ahead flicker in her peripheral vision, their buzzing sound a constant reminder of the harsh, sterile environment she's about to enter. She's been through worse. A lot worse. But she won't show it. Not now. Not here. This is part of the mission and she's in control. The processing room smells of sweat and harsh cleaning chemicals, a stark contrast to the calm and order she's been trained to maintain. She stands perfectly still as the booking officer orders her to pose for her mugshot. The camera clicks and she doesn't blink. Every muscle in her body is tense, alert, but outwardly she's a statue. There is nothing in her expression, nothing in her posture, that reveals the storm raging inside her mind. This moment, this arrest is far from ordinary. Name? The booking officer asks, his gaze never leaving the screen of his computer. His voice is indifferent, as if they haven't just arrested someone who could bring down the system they believe they've built so carefully. Victoria Taylor, she answers, her voice steady, unwavering. Address? He asks again, his tone carrying a flicker of surprise when she gives him her Maple Avenue address. The officer pauses, eyes narrowing as if his mind races through the implications of her response. A subtle shift in his tone gives her the sense that he's recognizing the weight her neighborhood carries in this town. That's in Westfield Heights, he notes, more to himself than to her. But Taylor notices. She hears the judgment in his voice, the barely concealed disdain for the area where she lives. Westfield Heights is a predominantly black neighborhood, and Taylor knows that in the eyes of the police, it's a place they deem troublesome. Their preconceived biases are glaringly obvious, and they've already formed an opinion about her based solely on her address. But Taylor doesn't let it rattle her. She stays quiet, watching, processing every move, every look. The officer takes her fingerprint, pressing her thumb against the scanner. The black ink stains her skin, leaving behind a reminder of her status in their eyes, a criminal. Behind her, she hears the familiar sound of Officers Wilson and Harris laughing by the water cooler. Their voices carry easily across the room, filled with an obvious mockery. Another one from that neighborhood thinking she's special, Harris says, his voice deliberately loud. Acting like the checkpoint doesn't apply to her. Taylor catches every word. She knows their kind of humor. She's heard it too many times before. It's not just a joke, it's a statement about who they think she is. But she won't let them see how much their words affect her. Had to put her in her place, Wilson replies, his tone dripping with contempt. These people need to learn. The words hit harder than they realize. Taylor doesn't react, but inside she's already cataloging everything. Every word. Every face. Every inflection in their voices. This is the part of the mission that requires precision. They're playing a game, but she's the one who will win. As the officers continue their casual conversation, oblivious to the significance of the situation, Taylor stands completely still, forcing herself to remain an immovable force. There's no room for emotion. Only precision, only clarity. Phone call? She asks the booking officer, her voice even, professional. He nods, gesturing to the wall phone. One call. Make it count. Taylor dials the number she's memorized, the digits running through her mind as she presses each key. Her phone call isn't to her lawyer, nor is it to family. It's something far more important. The crisp voice on the other end of the line answers quickly. Operations Center, Pentagon. Authorization code Tango Delta 794, Taylor states, her voice clear and commanding. A moment of silence passes before the voice on the other end responds. Confirmed. General Taylor. Response team deploying. Timeline 43 minutes. Taylor hangs up the phone, a faint smile tugging at the corner of her lips. It's done. The operation is in motion. At that moment, Councilman Edward Bennett storms into the station. His expensive suit and gleaming championship ring a sharp contrast to the grim surroundings. He's everything Taylor knows he is, political, untouchable, and ready to make sure his program, the very program that's meant to control the people of Westfield Heights, continues without interference. Another troublemaker? Bennett demands, his voice loud enough for everyone in the room to hear. His eyes flicker toward Taylor through the glass. Wilson nods, the same smug look on his face. Just processing her now, sir. Good, Bennett says, his eyes narrowing as he assesses Taylor. These checkpoint resistors need consequences. The program is too important. Taylor's eyes never leave Bennett as he walks away. This man, this politician, thinks he's untouchable. But in a few short minutes, everything will change. Back to the checkpoint, the real conflict. 2 hours earlier, the setting sun painted the sky a vibrant orange over the neighborhood of Westfield Heights. General Victoria Taylor was driving her modest sedan through familiar streets, the rhythm of the road a comforting constant. Her neighborhood was a world she knew intimately, its imperfections, its struggles, but also its strength. As she turned onto Maple Avenue, she noticed the subtle change in the atmosphere. The neighborhood's edges began to soften, gradually giving way to the wealthier, whiter suburbs of Greenfield. It was a transition that happened every day, physically, culturally, and economically. She'd seen it 1,000 times. The contrast was stark, but it had become almost invisible to her over the years. Then the flashing blue lights ahead caught her attention. Police cruisers, strategically parked, blocked the road. A checkpoint. Taylor had driven past it many times before, but today felt different. She slowed her car, her fingers already moving to roll down the window. She had nothing to hide, nothing to fear. It should be a quick stop. Nothing out of the ordinary. Or so she thought. Officer Harris approached her vehicle with a flashlight, the beam sweeping across her face as if she were a criminal under investigation. The moment his eyes landed on her, she knew something was off. "License and registration," he commanded, his voice cold, businesslike. Taylor reached for her glove compartment, her movements deliberate. As she handed over her driver's license, she asked, "May I ask what this checkpoint is for, officer?" Harris stiffened. The question wasn't defiant, it was simply an inquiry. But his response told her everything she needed to know. "Just routine ID check now." The routine response didn't sit well with Taylor. She handed over her license without protest, but as Harris studied it, his flashlight lingered on her address. Westfield Heights. The moment the officer uttered the words "Westfield Heights resident" into his radio, Taylor knew the game was already in motion. His emphasis on her address wasn't lost on her. She watched him for any further signs of what she suspected. A few seconds later, his radio crackled back with a response. Harris's eyes narrowed in response and he looked back at Taylor. His gaze lingered a little too long. She wasn't just another driver, she was a target. "Is there a problem with my identification, officer?" she asked again, but this time, there was a steel edge in her voice. Harris didn't answer. Instead, he walked back to the cruiser, her license in hand. The silence between them was thick, but Taylor knew better than to break it. She watched through the rearview mirror as Harris showed her license to another officer. The two officers shared a brief laugh before turning their attention back to her car. It wasn't subtle. They weren't trying to hide their amusement. Captain Wilson emerged from the command vehicle, taking his time as he approached her sedan. Harris pointed toward the car and Wilson nodded slowly. The message was clear. This wasn't just any checkpoint. They were targeting her. "Step out of the vehicle, ma'am," Wilson ordered, his tone sharp. "May I ask why?" Taylor replied, her voice calm but firm. "My license is valid." Wilson's eyes darkened. "Step out now." She felt his gaze shift, his hand resting on his holster. It was a threat meant to show her who had the power. But Taylor didn't flinch. She knew her rights. Enhanced search protocols required reasonable suspicion of criminal activity. There was no reasonable suspicion here. "What's your suspicion, Captain?" she asked, her voice steady yet cutting. Wilson's expression hardened. "Out of the car." His voice was now an outright command. Taylor complied, her movements slow and deliberate. "I'd like to note that this appears to be selective enforcement," Taylor added calmly, making sure the words carried the weight of truth. Her voice didn't rise nor did it falter. She was simply stating the obvious. Wilson stepped closer, his eyes narrowing. "We decide what's selective," he muttered, though it was clear his patience was starting to wear thin. "I decline consent to search my vehicle without probable cause," Taylor stated firmly, her words sharp but professional. Behind her, Harris snickered. "Look at the lawyer here," he mocked, moving closer. "Thinks she knows the law." Taylor didn't flinch. "I'm familiar with my Fourth Amendment rights," she replied, her tone even, calm and controlled. Wilson stepped closer again, but Taylor refused to back down. His eyes narrowed as he tried to make her back off, tried to make her comply in ways he deemed appropriate. But she was no ordinary citizen. She was trained. She was ready. As they continued to push the limits of their authority, the other drivers at the checkpoint began to notice. Some reached for their phones, recording the interaction. Taylor caught the eyes of a few of them. She knew they would remember this moment, just as she would. Each face, each badge number, each license plate was committed to her mind. It wasn't just about her anymore. It was about the larger picture. The injustice she knew was simmering beneath the surface, and today, it was about to spill over. "Last chance," Wilson barked. "Consent to search or face obstruction charges." Taylor held her ground. "I respectfully decline and request a supervisor." "I am the supervisor," Wilson snapped, signaling to Harris. "Detain her." Harris moved in quickly, grabbing Taylor's arm and twisting it behind her back. The pain shot through her shoulder, but she didn't allow herself to react. The officers shouted at her to stop resisting, but she wasn't resisting. She was complying under protest. She knew her rights and she wasn't afraid to stand up for them. "I'm not resisting," Taylor repeated, her voice clear, steady and calm. "I'm complying under protest." Wilson stepped closer, his voice dripping with condescension. "You don't tell us how to do our jobs." Taylor's eyes flickered toward Harris's body camera. She noticed that the red recording light had stopped blinking. "Your body camera appears to be malfunctioning, Officer Harris," she pointed out, her voice measured and sharp. "Mind your own business," Harris snapped, tightening his grip. Taylor's mind was already working, calculating, analyzing. She could disable both officers in seconds, but that wasn't her mission. She wasn't here for a fight. She was here for something much bigger. "I'll be filing a formal complaint," Taylor said clearly, her voice unwavering. Wilson's laugh was cold and mocking. "Good luck with that. Councilman Bennett personally oversees checkpoint operations. Your complaint goes straight to his trash can." Taylor didn't flinch. This was just the beginning. Selective enforcement exposed. Taylor's mind was a whirlwind as she sat in the back of the police cruiser, her body tense but her expression steady. She was aware of everything around her, every detail, every sound. The officers believed they were in control, but she knew better. Their treatment of her was nothing more than a demonstration of the system's flaws. They thought they could intimidate her. They thought they could make her comply with their unjust laws. But they were wrong. The ride to the station felt like it lasted forever, the hum of the fluorescent lights in the cruiser a constant reminder of the power dynamics at play. The officers had no idea who they were dealing with, and that would cost them dearly. The entire system they thought they could manipulate was about to be turned on its head. When the cruiser finally arrived at Greenfield Station, Taylor was ushered into the holding area, the harsh, fluorescent lights casting cold shadows on the walls. The air smelled of stale coffee and floor cleaner. It was a sterile, institutional environment, a far cry from the familiar streets of Westfield Heights. The booking officer led her to a cold metal bench, where she was instructed to sit. Taylor sat upright, back straight, her face composed. She wasn't afraid. She wasn't intimidated. She was focused. Her military training had prepared her for this. The station, the officers, the system, they were all just obstacles in the path of something much bigger. And she would not let them stand in her way. The door to the holding area opened, and a new figure stepped inside, Councilman Edward Bennett. He was impeccably dressed in a tailored suit, his championship ring gleaming under the harsh lights. Taylor recognized him immediately. He was the political force behind the checkpoint program, the one who had orchestrated the very system that had been used to target her and others like her. He was the embodiment of power, wealth, and privilege in Greenfield. Bennett's eyes flicked toward Taylor and a smirk crossed his face. "Another troublemaker?" he asked, his voice dripping with disdain as he glanced through the glass at her. Wilson, standing nearby, nodded, a smug expression on his face. "Just processing her now, sir." Bennett's eyes narrowed as he assessed Taylor. "Good," he said, his tone cold. "These checkpoint resistors need consequences. The program is too important." Taylor's gaze never left Bennett. He might have thought he was untouchable, but he had no idea who he was dealing with. His time was running out, and soon he would understand that the game was over. He wasn't the one in control anymore. As Bennett turned and left the room, the officers began to take their places in the station. It was clear they felt no remorse for their actions, no hesitation in carrying out the injustices they had been trained to enforce. But they were oblivious to the storm that was brewing, the larger forces now at play. Behind the scenes, Taylor's mission had already begun. The Pentagon was watching. The protocol had been activated. And she knew that in just under 43 minutes, everything would change. The clock on the wall ticked away the seconds. 9:17 p.m. The time was coming, and Taylor remained calm. She was prepared for what was to come. The officers, the councilmen, the entire system, none of them understood the gravity of the situation. They were too caught up in their own power, their own narratives, to see the bigger picture. But Taylor saw it clearly. She had a mission to complete. She had the training, the knowledge, and the support of a system far greater than the one that had just tried to break her. As she sat there, waiting for what was next, she allowed herself a moment of quiet reflection. This wasn't just about her. It was about the people of Westfield Heights and every other community that had been targeted and oppressed by the system. This was about justice, about exposing the flaws and discrimination woven into the fabric of Greenfield's checkpoint program. She could already hear the sounds of the response team gearing up, preparing for their next steps. The Pentagon was mobilizing, the operation was in motion, and in 43 minutes, everything would change.